property and indeed moving to France, which we're going to touch upon. My name is Liz Rowlinson, editor of Placing the Sun website, defunct magazine, and I'm here with my bevy of experts who I'm going to introduce first. Fabienne.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me. So my name is Fabienne Bisset, and I'm the founder of Relocate Limited, which is a London-based French property consultancy, and we primarily specialize in the sales of properties in the south of France that cover the Côte d'Azur and part of the Provence, namely the Alpes-Maritimes and Var regions. And we sell all types of properties, but we also assist buyers through the whole process, through our contacts with notaire, financial advisors. So we basically help our customers, our clients, from the first contact to the keys.
Thank you. And then we've got Fabienne.
Yeah, but quite the same name, but not the same. So you can call me Fab, actually. That's the name of my company, so you'll know it. So I'm Fabian. I'm the managing director of Fab French Insurance. That's probably the sexiest topic. I'm sure you want to hear about that, insurance. It's part of the relocation journey for visa applications and other stuff. And we're working hand in hand with Richard, and we've been doing that for 5 years. So basically the thing is we help you move across as simply as Frenchly possible.
Thank you, Richard.
Hi there, guys. Thanks for coming. My name's Richard. I'm the Managing Director of French Connections HCB, and we're the leading relocation company to France. We specialise in full relocation packages from visas to all the way to residency, and quite a lot more in between. And we work, of course, with Fabien for health regulations and health services that you'll need for the visa applications, but also all types of insurances that you'll be able to take out with these guys. And we'll try to make your move to France as easy as possible.
Thank you. Planning is key, and placing some currency is part of that. Tom?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name's Tom Arnold. I'm a director of A Place in Some Currency. We help people when it comes to their overseas property dream, when it comes to the currency aspect. So you're going to have pounds in the bank most likely. You're going to need euros to buy a property in France. We can help you get the best exchange rates and also develop a really firm strategy for how you're going to handle those international payments you need to make.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of people are very at the beginning of their journey here. They think they might want France. What are the things they have to consider, Richard, in sort of honing down their search?
Yeah, absolutely. What would be really useful to know, I'll get you engaged, guys. Who's thinking about second home ownership? Could you put your hand up? Okay, so all of the rest of you looking to permanently move to France. Good choice. Good choice. The reason I asked that is that just to not bore you with too many topics in context, but generally speaking, everything is now going to happen with a visa. So you're going to have to choose which type of visa. If you're looking at a second home ownership, you might not want to become a resident of France. So you might actually be happy enough with a 6-month or 4-month visa, or indeed a 90-day rule out of 180. We have a lovely calculator on our website if you want to use it that we've created because there was nothing else out there, like most of the services actually that we've ended up providing. But in context, if you want to permanently move, there are only 2 types of renewable visas in France. A long stay 12-month, what we call a visitor visa, it encompasses retirement visa and in certain contexts also remote working capacity. Or, indeed, a talent passport visa. So, if you could play the piano, no, maybe. If in context, it will be, the French have tried to simplify this. So, you will have an entrepreneur visa encompassed in that. There'll be a minimum income, a minimum deposit of 30,000 euros, for instance, to open that entrepreneur type visa. It needs to come with a business plan, all sorts of things. There'll be also an investment visa. There's also a student visa in there. There's also particular skill visas. But those are 4-year packages, if you like. You're going to get 4 years worth of validity on that visa, and then it will be renewable to a couple of sigil. That being said, it's more difficult to apply for that one. So a lot of people might go out on a visitor and then renew and change their status. I'm sure those of you who've been watching far too much of Dick and Angel or something along those lines and might want to open a gîte. So one of the biggest tips I can give you today is potentially leaving on a visitor, changing your status after 10 months is potentially a good option for most of you guys wanting to do it. For second home owners, maybe just a 6-month visa and just renew it when needed. The problem with that, if I may add, is that you can't reapply whilst you're holding it, so it's a bit restrictive. So quite often, a lot of my clients will just do 12-month visas.
Okay, yeah, not to understand, but it's not impossible. It's lots of people are
Very,
doing this. So.
very possible. We do 1,500 a year. 1 failed actually in Beijing, so hopefully you'll give me that one. We still found a solution.
Okay, and then but taking a step back, just in terms of you don't have to buy a property to get a visa, do you?
No, in theory not. In fact, for the 6 months or 4 months visas, you could just have an Airbnb or Booking.com or something like that. If you do want a renewable type visa, you have to be quite careful with that because they want to have a permanent or safe place to live. So I always say, if you go online and you watch videos of Fabian and I talking about this, 3 fundamental pillars of the application. Healthcare, you can sort that out, nice and easy. Second part, income. Usually most of you are going to be liquidating assets. So obviously Tom here can help you with converting those, but in context, your minimum income requirements, €1,389 per person, times 12 in a current account. That's where you usually go wrong if you've got it in an ISA and you don't have it in a current account, it's no good. But that's kind of easy, right? You sold your property, your liquidities are good. The issue being the third point is the safe place to live. Now, in France, being a landlord, unfortunately, I've learned the hard way, every sort of right resides with the tenant, not necessarily the landlord. So in a safe place to live, if you've got a 12-month rental contract, that's great, that works. Or you have to complete on the property. So chicken and egg situation. You can't have the visa before you complete. You might not want to complete until you get the visa.
Okay, before we come on to healthcare, which is obviously part of the relocation process, Fabienne, if people are just wanting to buy their property first, what are the things they should be aware of? Because I mean, a lot of people say the French buying process is better than the British and easier.
Yes, yes, absolutely. The process is not complicated at all, and in fact, I would say, I would go as far as saying that France is probably one of the safest countries in Europe to buy. So much so that you have, for example, a 10 days cooling off period when you sign a pre-contract or reservation contract, just to think about it. If you don't want to go through with it, then you just say goodbye. There's no penalty, nothing. So in terms of thinking about the process itself, I mean, I suppose the key questions are really, what do you want to do with this property? What's the purpose of it? And I'm thinking more second homes as opposed to relocation here, really. Is it for your personal usage? Is it for rental purposes? Are you thinking of using it or letting it? What are the key features or facilities that you're looking for? Do you want to be close to amenities or isolated? All sorts of questions that you're more than happy to help you answer, really.
And the purchase costs of a French property on top of the sales price?
The sales price. So the prices that you see have to include all agents' fees. That's the key to remember. The French stamp duty, there are 2 French stamp duties actually. So you have the new build and off-plan properties, and you have existing properties. So the stamp duty on new and off-plan is around 2.3%, 2.3% of the asking price. And existing resale properties, you'll be looking at around 7.58% of the asking price. It's all very transparent. The notaire fees are probably higher than in Spain, for example, because much involved in the process. And they have to make sure that you know exactly what you buy, and that the vendors are, selling a sort of real property, that there's no issues with the properties. So much so, in fact, that when you sign the deed after having reserved the property, you have to have a translator. You have to pay for the translator, I'm afraid, but it's compulsory, and it's around 300, 400 euros, maybe 500 euros on the Côte d'Azur, I guess. So you have the notaire fees, you have the translator. If you apply for a mortgage as well, you have the mortgage fees to bear in mind. And these are the key costs.
And with all those costs, Tom, how can using currency broker, save you some money?
Absolutely. So, as Fabienne said, when you sign that initial contract, once your cooling off period is finished, you're going to need to pay the property deposit, and then typically 2 or 3 months later the settlement costs to complete on the purchase. And during that period, the pounds that you've got in the bank in the UK or tied up in assets that you're then going to liquidate are obviously fluctuating in so much as how many euros they're going to achieve for you. So the first thing I would say is it's very important to understand that the currency markets constantly move. If you see a rate on Google for a day of 114 or 115 or something, that is rounded up, that is very much not how the market works. It is constantly moving, and being aware of that and speaking to a specialist who can help guide you through that and develop a strategy to make sure you make the most out of the money that you have. You exchange at the right time, you exchange in the right way, and you make the very most of your money is critical. All UK banks offer currency exchange as a service, but either online facility you might use or the person in the branch is just going to process a transaction for you. They're not going to make sure that you're doing it at the right time. They're not going to make sure you're doing it in the right way. When you send the funds out there, they're not going to make sure that you're protected from any receiving bank charges, for example. Post-Brexit, one of the facilities we offer is we have a suite of banking in Germany, so that when we send funds around Europe, we're sending them intra-EU. So there's no risk of any post-Brexit nastiness happening in terms of charges. So there's lots and lots of pitfalls when it comes to sending money internationally. Making sure you're dealing with a specialist is absolutely essential, as well as knowing that that specialist is also going to be able to typically save you about 3 or 4% on the exchange rate, which very quickly adds up into a very significant amount when you're talking about the value of a property purchase.
The pound's quite good at the moment, isn't it?
Is it? Not bad, not bad. It's not, the heydays when I came into the currency market, 140s and 150s are sadly very much gone, but yeah, the kind of 116, 117s we're looking at the moment are the best we've seen for a while.
Just bring Fabienne in, sorry, just on post-Brexit nastiness, visas, healthcare. Can you explain just how the healthcare access will work for Brits now?
Yeah, sure. So actually, before Brexit, basically most of the clientele we were working with for that private medical insurance was always a requirement for visas, but it was mostly Americans, Canadians, all the non-EU citizens. And actually, Brexit happened, and I think the officials in France were like, well, time to reassess the situation. They've kind of tightened the rules for everyone, so not just for you. That's the good news. But so they became more picky in the kind of policies they accept, and you have to follow the rules by the book. So medical insurance, or basically some sort of insurance or some sort of medical coverage, is required. There is a logic in that. When you're relocating to France, unless you go with a 6-month visa and you're like a short-term, let's still call it a long-term visa, a shorter-term visa. It could be covered with a GIG, with a short-term visa. But if you go for long-term visas, you basically have no cover if you're in France. So should you have a heart attack or a hit by a bus, whatever. I told you, insurance is all about this sympathetic stuff. Basically, they want you to be covered. In case something happens, you should not be a burden to the state. So that's why they made this rule, so that until you can be part of the French system, and here goes the good news, you can actually apply for free. This is one of the post-Brexit agreements. So after you've been in France, so it all lives in your head as well. Basically, once you consider yourself a French permanent resident, which could be from day one of your visa, because you want to relocate there, so it's okay. After 90 days, you're kind of a long-term tourist now. They'll allow you to apply for French social security, which we call the CPAM, which is the equivalent of your NHS. So you can do that for free, or basically for free. Well, some people think that as you can apply after 90 days, you just need 90 days cover for the policy of private medical insurance, which is incorrect. You need a 1 year cover, because this is France. It could take a month, it could take 6 months, for you to get into the system, and a month is more than highly unlikely. But still, so they want to make sure you're covered no matter what. And actually, when it comes to the end of your visa, like by the expiration date of your visa, should you have failed to be into the French social security system, then you'll need to reapply for that private medical insurance. Okay, so that's basically an incentive for you guys to rush into the French system. But again, the good news is you don't have to wait until you file a tax return or whatever. You can apply after 90 days to get into the French system, and that's usually, on average, you're looking at a 6 month process. So 90 days waiting period, 6 months. So usually within 9-10 months-ish, you should be part of the French system, which is very good news, because on top of having a very good healthcare system now, you will also be able to remove, like ditch that pricey private medical insurance policy that no one would have bought should it was not a mandatory requirement, and then just top it up, so top up the social security cover with the mutual. And actually the mutual is very good, even the French, Richard and I, we have a mutual. Every French would have one, so it's mandatory for you guys as expat to have a mutual if you have French social security, but even if it was not, all the French would have one anyway, okay? And the system, since 2020, is one of the bills, the laws that Macron actually put in motion. This one's very good, because since 2020, basically in France, you always have an option for free, 100%. Like even dentistry, even the glasses, you'd be provided with at least one option for free, should you have social security plus mutual. But at first, you'll have to go through the gates, through that private medical insurance policy, apply for CPAM, and then you can get all those perks and super benefits.
Yes, it's slightly complicated, but with your advice, then it's...
Richard can do that for you, hands-off approach. You don't have to worry about, don't remember anything I just said.
No pressure. I'm just a pretty face, it's my team that are fantastic. But the reality also, just to add, because quite often this is overlooked, and just on the legal side, on the purchasing side, France is actually a great country for people that are liquid asset rich. Unfortunately, a lot of you guys, if you're second home owners and you're going to buy a home in France, well, it's probably because you're lucky enough to have a nice home in the UK and your mortgage might be going down. So your actual asset in the UK, especially if you bought in the 1960s in London, is well over £1 million. Once you buy in France, if you're not mortgaging, you will be subject to what is called an IFI, Impôt sur la fortune immobilière. And that's where you really probably want to speak to a private banker or a bank in France before purchasing, as well as a notaire potentially or tax advisor to purchase under the property under a business agreement, potentially. SCIs or SARL de famille are good solutions, because you've got to consider inheritance tax and rules. If you guys have been busy and had a few marriages and different kids in there, you can't write a child out of a will in France. You've got to consider the immovable good, which is the property in France, subject to French law. So, private banking potentially for the guys that are lucky enough to have something over £1 million, then additionally, whether you be resident or not, by the way, you can be subject to IFI. So these are things that, in addition to when you're purchasing properties, you've really got to think about. So tax planning as well as visa planning. And to add to Fabian's bit about the social security thing, well, if you're still working, guys, they'll be taking your net worth, worldwide income. They don't double tax it. It's really lucky. No, 1963, there's a dual tax system between the UK and France. But if you've got access to an NHS still, you will have a social charge on top of that. So that was just my added bit to, it's nothing that I'm selling, so to speak, to you guys, but it's just a really key thing that people often overlook.
Thanks, that's a good point. And I've got a question actually, I think I'll ask you first, Fabian. I've been hearing from buyers that now, post-Brexit, getting a mortgage for British people in France for a small mortgage for a property under €200,000-300,000 has got a bit harder. Is that true?
Yes, it has. In fact, it's situations that evolve all the time, really, I have to say. So, yes, it was difficult. 2024. So, yes, Brexit didn't help. All that said, things were difficult. Mortgages were difficult to get at the beginning of last year, but it was also the case for French nationals. In fact, you know, with everything that was happening in the world and still happening actually, banks tend to sort of freeze and say, let's see what happens, and we're not going to help that many people. So we, our buyers managed to find mortgages, but it was much more difficult. And I think the time where they used to lend 90%, 80%. I mean, some of them at the moment actually saying we can lend up to 80%, which it's a case-by-case situation, really, looking at your assets. So it was difficult beginning of last year. It's getting easier. The good news also is that the interest rates are much lower, or are lower in France than they are in the UK.
Yeah, what are they at the moment?
I think 3.5 for the French national, is that right? And I think for the
3.8%. You say 4%, you're not far off. Right.
But that's for the for non-French buyers slightly higher than that. I mean, I had some of our clients had sort of 3.9, 3.8 end of last year. But again, as I say, things evolve, and we're going more positive than not in terms of mortgage offers.
What about buying a new property in France? New build?
I think that just to join back on mortgages, because quite a few people have come and spoken about mortgages. There's no credit rating in France, so it's all about scoring, basically points on the base of how much that you can be trusted. So building a relationship with a bank. Most specifically, most banks, once you've got an account for over 6 months, you're not considered the same level of risk as you are if you just open an account. If you've got money, guys, you'll get a mortgage. That's it. The other thing is when you've got liquid assets, you've got leverage. Very few people have got liquid assets these days. They're all tied up in various pension pots, etc. So you've got a good leveraging point. So it's worth having these conversations again before you purchase, rather than after. Because there's not really remortgaging and things like that don't exist in the same manner as you do. I get this because I've lived in the UK and I've lived in France, and I've done both in both countries, right? So it's a different system. So it's worthwhile having these conversations with estate agents, etc., with mortgage brokers, and potentially we work with one, the largest bank in France, where you can actually BNP Paribas, which you can open an account with through us directly. But that can be worth doing that, even if it's a year before you plan to buy, right? Because you can build it.
And if I could just add as well, in our experience, going straight to the high street banks is not probably the best solution. What we found is that if you go through a mortgage advisor, and not necessarily a big company, but the smaller ones, they really have the contacts with those banks, and it's on a case-to-case basis, but also a personal basis between them and the banks. We have a few contacts as well, and we find that those smaller brokers are extremely good at having mortgages, and very flexible and professional.
I was just going to say we're whizzing amount of time. I mean, any questions to ask our experts before we cover anything else? Thanks.
You mentioned that it's good to have a good relationship with your bank. Do you have to get a visa before you open a French bank account?
Not necessarily, but banks are looking into this. They've only just switched on to you guys and maybe being kicked out. But the point being is, you've got to consider this a second home, or if you're permanently moving. So that's the first bit, and banks will look at if you're, there's different rates based on that, if you're going to be renting properties, but also if you're going to be purchasing as a company that's registered under corporation tax, for instance, same as in the UK, then you become a separate entity. So they're looking at the safety of the package, because you'll be a director, but you'll have to guarantee it. But I think in some cases where you're going to be not living permanently in France, then yeah, opening a bank account could be pointless unless you're going to be transferring funds there. And yeah, so it's the case per case basis. But really, if you are moving to and it's going to be your main residence, that becomes a context they're going to look at if you can stay there. So yeah, visa is going to be required at some stage. Proof of completion potentially of your property. But I joined Fabienne's. The idea of brokerage is different to the UK, because every bank, every region is a franchise. So I know it seems sort of, compare it to car salespeople in the UK. You've got like a brand, and then you'll have 3 different dealerships, Dick Lovett, maybe Sytner, etc. Banks in France are similar to that. They all have they have a head office, and then regionally they have different setups. And so depending on which region you're purchasing, your brokerage, for instance, in Paris would probably be useless in Nice. So go local, as in go local to understand that regional package. But yeah, to answer your question, it's good to open a bank account beforehand. Needing a visa is also going to be something that they're going to ask for eventually.
Another question for the panel.
Hi, you mentioned that the stamp duty is very different from a new build that was 5 years or less to an older building. Does that get affected if you buy the property outright in cash? Do you get a lower? Or is there any intention for the stamp duty to change in France this year? Do you know there's any big changes?
So, do you mean that is there a difference in the stamp duty if you pay cash or if you pay through a mortgage?
Yeah.
No, there isn't. I mean, you have the mortgage fees to pay in addition, but no, it doesn't make a difference. I mean,
Actually, if I can add on that, they are talking, this is not a regulation yet, they're talking of actually applying some tax to French property owners which no longer have a mortgage. That's why when we were talking together, I was saying, in France, it's actually good to have a mortgage, because they're starting to consider this like you're no longer paying a rent for something, so it's kind of a benefit you have, and they want to tax the rent you don't have.
That's the rich. Again,
do they
get a mortgage.
are they considering? Are they going to?
It's being voted. Yeah, no, it's actually a bill. So not sure it will pass, but they're doing it.
Like the second home thing.
So do get a mortgage.
Hi, bonjour. I spoke to a couple of you earlier. I just have a question, because I'm a nurse, but we want to move to France to set up a seasonal business and live in France all the time. But I also want to keep my nursing registration in Britain, so I have to do a minimum amount of hours over 3 years to keep my registration going, in case we ever need to come back for whatever reason. So I'm just wondering how that works with sort of visas and things, and money, tax.
well, that's prudent to keep the options open. To jump onto that, well, yeah, that's absolutely fine as long as it's happening on UK soil, that you're still paying, if you are bringing in income through that activity, to do it from the UK, paid into a UK bank account. So as long as that happens, then you've got a dual taxation regime that's in place. It's all good.
Where would you be considered tax resident though?
Well, this is a grey area in a way, because you can still, essentially it's about, so either it's a movable goods, so if you've got a property in the UK that you're renting, then that will always be taxed in the UK no matter where you live, you'll have to pay. But you can be a dual tax resident. I am one, so it's pretty straightforward. You just need to file a P60 in the UK and a déclaration de revenus that matches that in France. So yeah. It's all doable.
We've got 2 questions.
Are there any recurring property taxes on an annual basis in France?
But yes, there's a taxe foncière, taxe d'habitation has being merged these days, but essentially that's like your council tax, if that makes sense. It's a lot cheaper than in the UK.
think we've got one further up the front, Sandy.
Am I running?
Quick, quick.
You've got me running today, you guys. Where are you?
The lady here.
Here she is. You have to hold the mic.
Hi there. I've just about to start a job being employed by a French firm in Paris. I have to work in London for 3 days. My boss is actually based in Paris. They're not expecting me to move, but it's always been my dream to have a second home. So I'm trying to figure out what I can do and if it would help with visas to be employed by a French company, firstly. And also from a mortgage perspective, does that help as well?
Well, before visas, there is one massive benefit you can have, because if you're paying social charges through your wage in France, then even whenever you have a visa or residency permit, you can be granted access into the French social security system because you're paying social charges. So then you would be eligible to top up health insurance, these mutuals, and all that stuff. Whatever you actually are living in France or not, whether you have a visa or not. Okay, that's one of the first super important perks, because that's a very good one. Then on visas, I'll let the expert talk.
Yeah, so that's when I had a real job a few years ago. I worked for an international firm and I was transferred to France. So the difficulty you have there, sorry, I'm trying to see. There you go. Your firm actually will have to give you a French contract if they have an office in France and you are in France. So they would have to. That's their legal requirement. And if basically you can't really remote work for them if they're in the country, if that makes sense. So if they've got employees with an office in Paris, they would have to employ you through the Paris office. So they'd have to change, and therefore you'd have to have a working visa or a talent passport visa. They'd have to prove that your skill set requires you to go to that country and not employ a French person.
They would argue that they wanted somebody from the UK, but the contract is actually an English contract. They haven't given me a French contract.
Do they have a UK branch?
They have a remote UK space, but
They're
not an
registered in
official.
Because what Richard was saying, I mean, well, there is just one option that's possible for you not to have a French contract. It would involve them to have a UK presence. If not, it's breaking the law not to have a French contract. But maybe we're getting a bit too deep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We're nearly out of time, but we can squeeze another one in. It's one on the front row. Yeah.
Just a quick question about pensions. If you're receiving a UK pension, obviously with the changes of Brexit, etc., could you give any advice on taxation of your pension in France, etc.?
Sure, so there are several specialist tax advisors in the UK, Blevins, Spectrum, IFA, etc., that I'd recommend speaking to because I'm just a business guy. But I do deal with an awful lot of people moving to France. Essentially, it depends where you get paid that pension. If you choose to be paid directly in France, then you will pay taxes, if you like, in France. But it's a dual taxation treaty, so it depends if you do choose to still be a dual tax resident and stay in the British system or not. So if you're permanently moving, you'll be taxed in the UK, in France, sorry. But there are also things to consider, like private pension transfers and all of these kind of things that can happen if you've looked into this, like CUROPS and HMRC regulated Eurozones. So there's an awful lot to consider if you've got private pensions, if you've got state pensions. But in theory, it's all doable, guys. Like, lots of people do it, it's just a lot of planning. Of course, all the services that we provide can be done completely free of charge. You can do it yourselves. Coming to us just makes accountability. Not insurance, yeah. No, I'm just talking about my stuff. Yeah, you've got to go through somebody for insurance. But for me, it's just about taking the ownership towards us, and we deliver goods, guarantee all of our services. So things like that, we would put you in touch with people. But planning is key.
That is a good note to end on. Planning here, where you are, got all these experts here over from France, or not as the case may be. But get your currency sorted out. People say to me they get their currency, they have a conversation even before they find the property.
Absolutely, I've said to everyone who's come to our stand today, engaging with the currency company is something you should be doing very, very early in the process. You want to make sure that when you go on a viewing trip, when there's a chance you're going to find a property, that you already have arrangements in place and that you already have a strategy in place for your currency. It's so critical. The difference that the currency markets can deliver can be many percents, and as soon as that's hundreds of thousands of pounds, it can be a lot of money. So having that strategy in place before you even get on a plane or a ferry or a train to go over to France to have a look at property is critical.
Talk to the visa, insurance, agents, and just really make the most of all the experts here. So I hope that's been really helpful. Come and chat to these guys afterwards out there, and thank you very much.
Thank you.